He's trying to dethrone you. He's trying to embarrass you. He's trying to do X, Y, and Z. And it becomes a fuel source for you. And for me, for example, like when I was younger, and I talk about this a lot, when I played in high school, I played very angry.
I feel like everybody's right and everybody's wrong.
100%. Why is this important? Why are we even going here? He's helped a lot of guys. He's also not had success with a lot of guys.
Come in with a purpose, and they're very intentional with what they do and how they do it.
From the majors to the sandlot, baseball and softball share space in one place. Welcome to the farm system.
Fellas, and the ladies, welcome back to another episode of The Farm. Oh, this can be unfiltered.
We're going.
We go. I mean, listen, at this point with the podcast, we got to, you know what I'm saying? We're going to do some,
live.
we got some reorganization.
Spicy up in here.
Yeah, we got some reorganization going on. But listen, I got a treat for y'all today. Listen, they never had it, but like, again, along with it is that, first off, let me give you the intro. All right. It's not good for you to intro yourself. Let me intro you. All right. If there's anybody that can intro you, it's going to be me.
Bring me home.
All right. So Taylor and I have been best friends for over a decade, almost a decade and a half. We're getting close.
We're getting close.
That means we're
Getting
getting old.
Yeah.
All right. But we're going to go through the whole, backstory of what all those things look like, and all those things as well. There's so many stories that I think will come up, and also to be interesting podcast wise between you and I, just going through all the conversations of so many years and so many moments.
Hey, I got some
but
stories
I think
for y'all.
Yeah, I think this would be some interesting things of like diving into a lot of this stuff. But in any case, Tay, why don't you go ahead again and just give them some of the background, some of the things that you've done, X, Y, and Z there, and and I'll add some flavors, some things I'm sure you'll probably keep out of your normal intro. But go ahead, proceed.
Sure. So, obviously grew up in Vegas, went to UNLV, had 3 minors in addiction prevention, marriage and family therapy, and leadership and civic engagement. So as soon as I hopped out of college, started working in a women's and children's rehab center. Had a really great time, really great experience, then moved on to managing a women's sober living house here in Las Vegas, and another great experience, and just kept furthering my career in substance abuse, substance misuse, the recovery space, rehab, residential treatment centers. Long story short, ended up working my way to becoming the assistant executive director of a residential rehab center here. So in total, spent a good 6 years in mental health and in substance misuse and recovery. So that, landed me, ended up working on a bunch of different projects in the mental health space, which has been really, really awesome.
Yeah. So, over the years, you've had a lot of broad experience on a lot of different things. Definitely, I think just like with anybody else, and I think, really fits what we're doing as a company is how diversified, everybody here has a diversity of different talents and different things they're capable of doing. And so it's like, okay, well, first off, that's all great. Our audience loves that you've had all this diversified audience, these things, X, Y, and Z. But like, why the hell are you on the podcast? What are we talking about? And also too, again, why do you bring so much value to athletes and a lot of these things? And again, bringing in now, I think some of the bigger things is, one, I think you have a unique experience of understanding, like seeing the farm before the farm, right? Just even before the farm, obviously, with where I was personally, how, kind of gravitating towards this direction. But then also with that as well is having the effect of, okay, and then the farm started and how it progressed all the way through. So you actually have a unique place of like understanding kind of the heart of the company. And then also with that as well, I want to dive into is all these different places along with that, not only from a development standpoint, but also dive into personally a lot of things that people struggle with all these things as well. So I do want to spend majority of time there, again, with I think a lot of that. And again, what I think is like some of the bigger issues that people are struggling with, athletes and a lot of these things that are now becoming not so nuanced, I guess, maybe, along with it. But why don't you kind of the first kind of start too, Tay, was back in the day, nobody wanted to go see us. Like sports psychology wasn't the it, It wasn't something that people like to talk about. It wasn't something that, a lot of people like to go in depth on. Now it's become, much more prevalent, especially after COVID and some of these other things. But once you kind of step there again, like how it used to be, how did that, it used to look. Yeah.
No, for sure. So funny enough, I was thinking about this, recently, because in 2012 was when I decided to start speaking. I was motivational speaking for, years, starting in 2012. And I started my brand and was going to speak to different, athletic teams, different youth teams, different organizations, from real estate to hair schools to, you name it. And back then, the title mental performance was almost unheard of, right? Like it was Tony Robbins and Eric Thomas and like just these big names, but people didn't know them for mental performance. They knew them as speakers. They knew them as a life coach. They knew them as, just being a motivator. And so as of recent now, I've noticed that almost every professional sports organization has a mental performance coach or a mental performance master.
A whole department.
A whole department.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's huge. And one, I think that is incredible, and it just shows how far sports have come in recognizing mental health and recognizing, the struggles that athletes face at, elite levels. There is no, I used to refer to it as the invisibility theory. Like, well, you're famous already, so you don't struggle with that. Well, no.
Yeah, there's no struggles with being, in the public eye.
Yeah, you get a big contract, you're not worried.
Yeah, you make millions of dollars. That should solve everything.
Yeah, that's it. That's it. And growing up, I had the unique experience. My dad trains fighters, and he, was training fighters at elite levels. I mean, I had the opportunity to meet Olympians.
You mean me, for example?
Yes, for sure.
Elite.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. Hey, don't let him fool you. I was putting him in toe locks in
That's true.
in high school.
Gotta watch out for the toe lock.
Watch out for those toe locks. But I got to meet some Olympians, and I got to have conversations with them, and I saw that they were not invincible, and they also had their struggles, and they also had identity issues.
Sometimes worse struggles than, normal people that are, again, doing other things as well, is just because of the performance, pressures that they put on themselves. And also too, and again, I'm sure you'll dive in this as well, is like people don't understand along with that is like, okay, sometimes people are elite because of traumas and things they've had in their past that they're trying to prove somebody wrong. And again, like guilty, I've talked about some of these things in previous podcasts, again, even with Bianca and some of those things as well. And also too, back in the day, even when Bo and I would go into some of the depths of, again, like, everybody has their childhood traumas. I don't think there's a human I've ever met that, again, unless they're not aware, that hasn't had some type of.
We have all got a good little ace to score.
Somebody's parents said no to them when they were young, and it caused the trauma in their head, right, of not getting those things. And so I think it's something that people run past all the time is like, I even call myself out about these things because when you listen to, and there's been a lot of documentaries coming out lately of some of these elite guys, like for example, the Michael Jordan documentary, right?
Huge.
Obviously with Kobe passing in the recent years. And then right now they just came out with the Derek Jeter, the captain, one that just came out. I don't know if you had a chance to watch that one. And
it's on my list.
And I haven't either, but I've gotten some of the snippets and things of that. And when you listen to some of these guys talk, and especially because I've done my own personal work with those things, and I know you're, really big in those areas as well, is you start to hear some of these things of like, for example, Derek Jeter and Michael Jordan both said, they were like, I remember every single person that ever doubted me. Like it's imprinted in their head. Like they use that as fuel. And I remember I used to do the same thing, but also too, it wasn't always rooted in the most healthy places.
Right.
And my intentions and also my mental health wasn't always in the most best places when I was rooted from that place. It worked out. Again, Michael Jordan, and whatever you call worked out, right? It might have worked out for them because they had become elite. Well, there's a lot of people that have similar things like that, where it doesn't necessarily work out to, you be Michael Jordan or Derek Jeter or those other things. And it's something people run past all the time thinking like, oh, Derek Jeter is so tough. Michael Jordan is so tough mentally. When again, like socially, for example, and not to go on my whole dialogue here, but again, this is one thing I noticed with like, I know purposely for me, I remember like I was watching a lot of Kobe clips and Michael Jordan clips, and again, if you're new here, maybe you haven't heard, but I'll talk about my faith quite a bit. And one of the things, for example, was I started going like the Mamba mentality and all these other things, and we can go down that whole route. And one thing, at one point, I was actually sitting in Jarrell's office and we were talking, and you call it the Holy Spirit, wisdom, X, Y, and Z, God, universe, whatever your thing is, right? But for me, God's speaking to me and saying, like, again, did I call you to be like Kobe? Did I call you to be like Michael Jordan? Or did I call you to be like Jesus, right? And those are two different things. The Mamba mentality, again, the people can take on these things and start to idolize a certain way of how Michael Jordan walked, how Kobe walked, how these X, Y, and Z, and like, they're struggling with mental things as well, which again could have maybe drove them to be at this elite level, and maybe someone's idolizing this elite level rather than, again, like, a lot of people didn't like hanging out with Michael Jordan. A lot of people didn't like hanging out with Kobe. A lot of people didn't like hanging out with Derek Jeter, right? Because again, along with it is like everything's a competition. Everything is all these other things. And like, you're right, there's some performance in there, but I'm just bringing all that back home that, these guys are also elite level athletes that are struggling with some real things that you're seeing expressed in greatness and society standards. But when they're, with their sports psychologist or X, Y, and Z, like, there's some things in here that, might not be the most healthy long-term, even though they made them great when they're playing. And you see a lot of athletes, committing suicide. You see a lot of athletes, all these things, when once their career is over, right, that the same skills that might have helped them when they were playing, or the skills or mindsets that might have helped them when they were playing, might not be the healthiest when they go back into the real world. Right. And I think a lot of people struggle with that transition and unpacking so many layers that, a lot of people don't even want to touch on, to say, oh, Kobe might be struggling mentally, or Michael Jordan might be struggling, or Derek Jeter might be, because these are people that they idolize, and they don't see them as people. They see them as elite performers, and I should try to be like that, when it's not always like that. And you've had that experience.
And too, I mean, there's the saying, like, it's lonely at the top.
Yeah.
Well, it's lonely at the top, but it's lonely in a lot of different areas, right? It's lonely at the top in my head. It's lonely at the top in the game. It's lonely at the top at practice. Why? Because you have suddenly made everyone else a competitor for you. That guy is trying to take your spot. That kid over
your
there
teammate,
is trying to get
friend,
your contract.
your family.
Your wife, she doesn't want you to stay late in practice. Your husband, he doesn't want you to stay late in practice. Why are you traveling with the coach? Distraction. And then you suddenly create this reality, right, where you're on an island.
They don't want me to win.
Wants you to win.
They don't want me to win.
Yeah, they don't want me to win.
Yeah.
And then,
God did.
And then, exactly. That's right. I heard that. And then you start to struggle, and you have created this picture of everyone around you being against you.
For sure.
And now you have created that
sure.
no one's there to help you.
Yeah.
And no one's there to listen. And they don't understand what I'm going through.
And I think that's a key point, is that for me, like, it was a fuel source for me. And when I took that fuel source away, I did have to transition into, okay, well, what is my fuel now? Because I was compensating. For example, like, you'll hear Michael Jordan at one point in his clip, and again, maybe we'll put this on social media at one point. We'll snag it all together. But at one point, Michael Jordan was talking about, like, somebody would, let's say they're playing, right? And he's having an average game, X, Y, and Z, and someone just holds his three finish a little long in front of him. He would take that and be like, all right, I'm turning it on. I'm gonna put up 50. I'm gonna put up 60, right, or whatever. He's gonna use that, where that little thing, right, that's disrespectful. Now I'm gonna turn my game on, and he would use anything, because it is a fuel source. You can convince your brain that he's trying to he's trying to dethrone you. He's trying to embarrass you. He's trying to do X, Y, and Z, and it becomes a fuel source for you. And for me, for example, like when I was younger, and I talk about this a lot, when I played in high school, I played very angry, right, and that's when I played very well. Because I was compensating for my insecurities. I was compensating for how the other team would talk about me in X, Y, and Z. So I remember, for example, one game in my head, it was a summer game. I was playing I was playing at Shine High School. Our rival was Shadow at the time, right? And Shadow was like a comparable school that they're a little bit better than us, but we could beat them, right? And especially when my head was like, with me on the mound, we could definitely beat them, right? I can control the game, all these other things. I can hit, blah, blah, blah. And I remember that I got on the mound and I had eye black on, and this was when Harper was coming up, and I had the
eye
warrior,
black was hot.
2 lines down the face, the whole thing. But I'm a pitcher, and at the time, pitchers don't wear eye black even on TV, right? You don't see pitchers ever with eye black. That's a position player thing, right? So I was on the mound. And I heard the coach in the dugout, head coach of the summer team, him go, "Oh, we got a warrior on the mound today." Ha 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 ha. And I was like, game on. Like my head was like, click. I struck out like 16 or something like that.
Yeah.
I was pissed. Like he was just like that from that point forward. I'm like, yeah, like that's all I needed to get me going forward. And then we'll idolize that or put that up on a thing. But like, that's it. That's the type of player. I want that dog. I want these other things. And that in itself necessarily isn't the issue, but it's what I was compensating for, which what in reality was with that is I had developed this place where it was very important what that coach thought of me. It was very important what that other team thought of me. Right. It was really important that they respected me and that they gave me status and they remembered me and all these other things. And I'm now putting my worth, right, my self-worth and my confidence and all those other things like in their hands. When they shouldn't have that power over me. And there was some really mental things again. And I mean, again, I was, 17 years old or whatever, 16 years old. But again, like these were real things that I had to develop in my head. And, again, when people hated playing against me when I was younger, because again, I don't know if I think we're like it's my podcast, say what I want, is that like people thought I was a douche.
Yeah.
Right. Because again, I was that guy that you hated playing against. And also some people say like, and I used to say too, like, oh, but you love being my teammate. No. My teammates also hated me. I was also a douche.
Yeah, well, I was just going to say, it's hard to be on your team as well.
Yeah, you're not a great teammate because it was I. And I also, just like you said, that mindset also drifted into my teammates that I had to show, they needed to see me as status because it wasn't about winning, right? It was about them recognizing me as a certain level of status, and that was compensating for the inadequacy or the lack thereof status when I was growing up. And I grew up poor, and I grew up with, we grew up with no status, and I didn't have any, these other things along with it. And there were some other things going on. And I just bring all that up to say like, okay, you see this elite performance and you idolize that player on the field, but like there's a lot of other things that are going on that might be making those things. And maybe, there's some transition and some other things that are happening, that there's life beyond sport. There's like actually caring for that person that is on TV, actually caring for what's going on with them at home, right? And like nobody, for example, like, and God forbid, like any of these players, like nobody wants to see, like, again, nobody wants Michael Jordan to, hurt himself, or, nobody wants, like, again, these are elite performers. We think of them as these things, and they're people.
Right. Yeah.
They're people.
Well, and I know you've talked about a lot of different stories throughout the podcast and its, existence. And, there's been times when you faced a lot of challenges and triumphs as well. Like you did break your hand in college, Yeah. There were a lot of things that you experienced. You did lose your dad. You did, the inevitable relationship issues. And again, too, like, I'm curious to know how many coaches you had that asked you about your mental space and where you were mentally when this series of things happened for you in your, college career.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think, I know for me personally, one, I did a lot of the little things that people like relationship wise, right? Like a lot of coaches, especially for men, along with that, I don't think that there's ever a coach that really asked me relationship wise. And I had some bigger things going. I had one coach, like, again, like, even when I was like at Pine Bluff, I remember when, relationships stuff going on. I think my girlfriend cheated on me with a best friend, the whole thing of the thing happened, and me coming in and being like, hey, these things happen. And he was kind of in the mindset, again, how he had grown up and all those other things as well, of being like, okay, well, like, not necessarily like, again, like it was like, I don't think that people typically at the time, and also how things are developing, is like coaches develop that skill of how to unpack that, right? Because, what does that mean to me? Like, again, you have to know me as a player, you have to know, me as a person, you got to know all these other things. Where I do want to give a shout out to the same thing too, is like when I was in junior college and I did lose my dad, that my, my coaches at the time were pretty receptive and the same thing. And were, even my teachers at the time, like gave me some slack in certain areas, even in high school. My dad was sick multiple times throughout my life there. Like, again, we made some adjustments and people helped me through those times. But, along with it, I think that I didn't have a sports psychologist, or I didn't have,
Right.
A therapist, or, we didn't have a team therapist or somebody that I could go to, or, and then also too, it never was even offered or even brought up as, hey, here's these resources. And I know, for example, I was just talking with somebody this morning, and now they have, again, Bianca has her app, but there's also too so many apps now out there where you have access to therapists. You have access to these people for a monthly fee where
Huge.
you can start to, take advantage of some of these resources. And I know you're like the omega of coming through with resources that people have access to that they're not even aware of.
Yeah.
But, and also too, just like it wasn't cost effective. There, there's these other things where now, like, again, you could talk to once a week with a virtual call with, again, some of these apps, like $60, $60 for 4 weeks.
Yeah.
Like, it's like, there's access to some of these things that, like you said, like at the time we didn't have apps, we didn't have all these other things. But as I went through these other struggles, or the bigger one too, out of all these things, like dad was definitely tough. The relationship was definitely tough. Well, how about the little things of, at every level I've ever played at, I was the man. And now I'm not. And I'm sitting the bench. And I'm hurt. Again, when I broke my hand, right? Like, I'm not playing now. It was my identity. I'm struggling with these things. Again, as I've talked about on the podcast, again, at other points, like I did steroids and stuff. Okay, what was I taking steroids for, right? What was the underlying reason? What was the root for that, right? And then on top of that as well, okay, now on top of that as well, of being like, now as I am on steroids and what that is doing to my brain, and how I'm thinking, and testosterone levels being through the roof and all these other things. I'm like, okay, all of those effects, who's like, no one's there unpacking those things with me like these. And then also too, like, I think hopefully everybody can remember too, like what it's like being 17, 18 years old. I'm not too far away from that. It's been a little over a decade now, but, I remember what it's like, again, trying to unpack some of those things by myself, and also at a time and my life, and also too in sports where, mental health was not was not something that was actively really talked about.
Yeah, the education just wasn't there at that time, I don't believe. And I mean, even again, like I mentioned, I was around a lot of elite athletes myself, and I would see guys, they get injured and then they get on pain pills and then they're addicted to pain pills.
Yeah.
And then, and that would happen in an instant, that would happen in a moment. And again, like that guy or a girl, whoever, may have just worked their entire life, essentially at a comprehensive level, to get to this point, and then they're injured, and then they get pain pills, and then they're addicted, and then they don't have the resources, and then the coaches just aren't able to unpack, like you said, that they don't have the training, they don't have the education for it. And now, again, we've come so far, and it's so amazing.
And nobody helped them.
And nobody helped them.
When they went through those things, they're just like, I had to figure it out on my own. And blah, blah, blah,
now
blah.
you're talking about generations of not understanding how to help someone through that time. And again, you're a teenager, you have high hormones, you're going through a ton of different things. You're in a different state. I mean, for those of you that don't know, Joey played in at least 4 different places.
Yeah, 100%.
Away from home, away from everyone,
No
he wasn't
family
making
there.
too many friends.
Yeah, didn't
He's
have
lucky
money.
He could get me on the phone.
For sure.
Right?
Yeah.
So again, like being again on that island of isolation and feeling alone, that is a very hard place to be. And now again, we are lucky to have apps that you can text. You don't even have to hop on the phone.
Yeah.
You don't even have to show your face.
Yeah.
You don't. It's so easy now to get that help.
And you don't
as long
gotta.
as
It could be
ask for it.
anonymous, right? Like
Anonymous.
Bianca's, right? Where
Yep.
it's like I don't gotta give them my name. I
Nope,
don't have to give
they
my
don't
thing.
have to know a
and
thing about
I
you.
could just say this is what I'm struggling with.
I need help.
I need help,
Mhm.
and I don't need you to even identify me right now because I feel. Again, that's
Right.
maybe the reason I wasn't reaching out in the first place. I don't want to go sit down with a therapist and tell them that I'm having, these issues because, again, maybe as a male, like, oh, I feel like it's weak, or I feel like, again, X, Y, and Z, or whatever those things might be, right? That your mental things that you're breaking through. And with that also being said, I do think that in some areas it can go extreme the opposite way, right? Of that, there is the piece of, okay, hey, like there is these things of going along with, with it. Like, again, for example, just because I'm facing adversity, right? There's going to be, it's like someone said no to me, I'm a trauma. Like, no to me when I was little and it becomes a trauma, right? Okay, like, yes, we also too, on the same sense, and I guess maybe somebody would, call, and I think it was overused the opposite way, in the same sense of like, oh, we're creating all these snowflakes, da 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 da. Okay, look, let me speak to you as a coach too, as well, right? Is there is a middle ground of like, yes, actually preparing and teaching skills of how to manage adversity, setbacks, and all these other things. And yes, can we stumble upon things and learn how to put a Band-Aid on things? And can we, X, Y, and Z throughout our lives? Yes. But a lot of times, again, even like some of these elite athletes, some of these Band-Aids that they've created or how they've repurposed that for fuel for sport. Well, some people are repurposing that fuel for negative things that are not, for, again, maybe, again, obviously when it gets crazy into, maybe they're stealing a ton and they just steal from all their friends and they steal from their teammates and X, Y, and Z, or they're a bully or they blah, 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 and they're bad teammates, right? And you're like, and you're as a coach going through, well, why is he acting like this and why is he X, Y, Z as a teammate? Well, there could probably be, again, maybe he's, something's going on at home, maybe again, these compensating for all these other things and all, X, Y, and Z, all those things. But all of this is attached to and not separate from performance, right? Sure. And I think that's a big piece as well. People understanding is like, as I unpack these things, it gives me freedom to express holistically more who I actually am and how I can actually perform. And operate there again. And that's why for me, getting angry at the time was a compensation. It was like almost like freedom because I didn't care about what people thought because I was so mad. Right. And then when I got in college, it became, I can't play angry anymore. Right. Because I got stiff. I was trying to do too much. It made my, movement patterns were bad. I was too aggressive, all these other things. And I had to flip to the thing where I just have to have fun. Like everything, I just got to come out here and have fun and not personalize it as like, a vendetta when I go on the field of like, like I'm trying to like, kill the other team, and I had to switch that up. But again, that was another thing of, I don't think I necessarily still completely dealt with the issues, but it was like a thing of like, I had to, I try to stumbled upon these things that happened to work when those resources and those things, like I could have been working on that since I was, in high school, or again, came to a facility like ours and have all these conversations and had these other mentors that, again, I could have came across a lot of those things a lot sooner rather than hoping I stumble upon them and hoping that, I'm navigating through the, the woods by myself, basically.
Right. Well, and I think too, again, we talk a lot about the identity and, for a player like you did reach a lot of titles, right? You did get good grades. You were an All-American, if I remember correctly. You did play D1. You played at a lot of, really high levels, and at each different state.
I don't want to run past that. I was never an All-American, but I was all conference, all region.
Okay, there we go. I got all conference, all region.
I did the chancellor's list, a whole bunch of things, but I was the All-American thing I never reached though.
Okay, all right. Well, keep you humble there.
Yeah, keep me humble.
Yeah, could have, would have.
Yeah.
But all the other titles that you got at different levels of your life, how do you think? Did the titles affect you every time you got a different one? Every time, you hit a new level, where was your mindset?
Yeah, I mean, I think when the titles of achieving things, I think it was good and bad. It made me strive because that's what I was trying to be. For example, like it was a goal of mine to be All-American, right? Like it was written in my hat. I had the initials AA in my hat. Like All-American was like, something in my head, like that was my goal. That's what I always wanted to be was, All-American. When I was training, when I was doing X, Y, and Z. So like in that way, like, those things can be very motivating. And the same thing of like, okay, like these are things, along with it. But also too, as I got these titles, one of the things that I needed, and I was talking to Jarrell about this yesterday too, is like, sometimes you need enough evidence to realize something's not working or that maybe what's happening is true, right? Like for example, let's say somebody, let's say it's, drinking or something like that, right? Okay, someone drinks one day of the week. Okay, well, it doesn't mean there's necessarily a problem, right? And then it's like, Okay, well then Tuesday, then Wednesday, then Thursday, then Friday, then Saturday. Or again, maybe it started as 1 drink a week, 2 drinks a week, 3 drinks a week. And then all of a sudden you're like, yo, okay, like now I drink every single day.
Yeah, now
and
it's been crushing a bottle every day.
Yeah,
Now it's a problem.
it's been 2 months. I can't think of the last time I haven't had a drink, right? Now that evidence, right, is stacked up enough where you can be like, yo, like what's going on? And that's an extreme version, but sometimes it's like, for example, like, again, like I even like to do this even with players. Like, for example, if you're training a player, if they do something one time, like let's say you do a swing and they get it done one time. One thing I always say, anybody can do it once, right? Just because you do it once, okay. But now, again, it also works the opposite way. For example, if they move, let's say they're playing, for example, let's say they make an error at second base. Okay, that's one error, right? But if we go a season long and you're, number 2 in the state with errors, okay, well, that paints a picture of like, obviously there's a problem here. It's not that you made one error. Right. It's that you almost led the state in errors, right? And now that pleads a case of something that there is an actual issue here, and like that sample size gives me something to go back for. And I know, for example, for me, I had realized, bringing that back home, is that when I had accomplished more and more and more and more and more and more. And then it continued in my professional life, right? Then I had the titles of, again, general manager, regional manager, second most profitable region in the world. Okay. Again, and then I had this thing where I was searching after the next thing, and the bigger thing, and the bigger thing, and the bigger thing, right? I was accomplished, things where I would get this dopamine hit of chasing after them. But every time I achieved something, the title or the thing became less rewarding, and it became empty. It's like drinking salt water, I kind of call it, right? Like you keep drinking and you need more and more and more and more, but it's never quenching. Like it's, and I think that as I did that more and more, the evidence stacked up enough because it almost worked, It almost, when I achieved things, it almost gave me it gave me moments of peace. It gave me moments of joy. It gave me moments of these other things, right? But it almost worked, but it didn't. I was always left, thirsty. I was always left not feeling fulfilled, that it wasn't enough. I still wasn't enough. I still didn't do enough. I still wasn't, I still had haters, right? Like I was going to keep running until I didn't have haters, when actually it works the opposite way. The more I achieved, the more it became a never, there's never enough people to prove wrong.
Well, just like you say, look, I want you to do good, but not better than me.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, and that's the thing, is I started running down that route of, it was an endless, process of proving people wrong. Well, the more people that knew about me, the more people I had to prove wrong, and again, and that built up enough data, right, or evidence in my head of okay, there's something here that is something that I need to work through and whatever, because now every time I get a promotion, it's like, again, I started getting promotions faster and faster and faster and faster. But as you move up the chain, that's not how things work. You usually move up quick at the bottom because they start to realize, okay, you have all these skills. So for example, I shot up to regional manager. I was the fastest one to ever be a regional manager with Planet Fitness. Within 6 months, I was the regional manager, right? Coming from no really work experience to shooting up to regional manager. Well, because I had those prerequisite skills already required, and also was in a perfect situation with the company to shoot up in that way. But also too, I real quickly hit a level where, okay, I needed to develop a lot more skills that I didn't have, but I was so used to achieving so quickly that now all of a sudden I became restless. Well, I've been doing the same thing for 6 months. Well, because before I got 4 title changes in 6 months. Now I haven't had a title change in 6 months, a year, 2 years, and I'm getting restless. Like, I need something new. I need that hit. I need that dopamine hit.
Urgency culture.
Yeah.
Now you're in there.
I need to have those, right? And so that's where I think, for the example, like the accomplishments for me, they were motivating, right? They did motivate me. But at the same time, again, I more see like a Band-Aid, and in reality had to get to a place where I abandoned the need for a title, abandoned the need to be this, surrendering status, surrendering position, surrendering all these other things, and being like, hey, like I don't need those things to feel like I'm something or to be something or X, Y, and Z. And that, took me a long time to get there. And again, I honestly wouldn't have got there too without my relationship with God. Like,
sure.
again, that's what got me those other things of being like, there's nothing that I can achieve on my own that will ever be enough. Because again, there's a deeper thing for me, now we're getting deep, but there's a deeper thing for me that I'm really trying to fulfill, that only God can fill and, fill that space and only, that the love that I needed to let in rather than all the hate that I was letting in. Because it's like that. It's like, I always call it like, it's like going, to a gas station that, has really cheap gas, but the gas is terrible, right? And you're putting that terrible gas in your car. Or if you think about it, if you're really into the body, it's like having really bad nutrition. In the moment, it gives you the hit. And I'm guilty of this, right? Is it gives you the hit. It fulfills the need, right? Hey, I need energy like right now, whatever. So I'm going to have this, energy drink, or I'm going to do X, Y, and Z, right? Like it does give me the energy, but there's also a bad byproduct that comes along with it. With that energy comes all these calories. With that energy comes all of these nutritional things that are not good for me. All these extra, again, my insulin levels are spiking because I'm taking in so much sugar all at once, or all these other things that happen. And there's real consequences of choosing the quick and easy route over and over and over and over again. And it happens, again, I'm sure I'm hitting on all these things of, again, like, especially as I started being around you and also learning a lot more from, I don't think people understand why they should, if I can recommend what I think people should really study when it comes to psychology, and I've learned so much from, is understanding the addict's brain.
For sure.
If you understand the addict's brain, it gives you so much perspective on your brain. Obviously, again, almost to the point where if you're not careful and it's like WebMD and you're like, well, I got that too. Oh, I got that too. I got that too.
I do that.
Now, and then the coming up the surface on that was realizing I do have that too, just not to that degree. Right. And not to the degree where, again, like, I'm, doing meth in the bathroom or something like that, to do whatever. But I do struggle with some of those things as too, but they've gotten it to a place where it's overwhelmed them. Like, again, it is now, they've fed that wolf for so many years. They've fed that, for so many years that all those things have happened. And again, like you'll have much more than that, but from spending time around you and then also too, really studying traumas and really studying people that struggle with some of these things, is that understanding, what I was going through wasn't my personal human experience. Like I wasn't a unicorn, right? Like, again, and that's like, I call it like the devil's lie, right? It's like he's trying to isolate you and be like, you're the only one going through these things and you should self-isolate and blah, blah, blah. And this is, and society kind of tells you the same thing, right? Where everybody puts this little front on, this facade, and they act like, they haven't gone through these things as well, or they haven't processed these things as well. And I also too, I think a lot of people don't want to have the conversation because it seems like a dark convo, right? Where it's like a heavy convo. But in reality, the light comes afterwards, right? Of going through it and actually addressing it and facing it head on and like talking about these things. And if you see almost like I almost kind of see it like going to the gym, right? Like when you're at the gym, like, yeah, like there's some stress that's going here, not to overwhelm, but again, overwhelm the muscle, it tears, right? You don't stress it enough, it doesn't grow, all these other things. There is some stress there where I do have to address what's going on. There is some heaviness here, but also too, after the heaviness becomes the light feeling, the good things that come from unpacking some of those things. And then when you start, it's just like working out there. It's not the working out. It's, what comes afterwards. The dopamine hit becomes, you start doing it because you know what comes afterwards. And that's what starts getting you. So again, like talking about these things, having these deeper convos, unpacking these things becomes something you want to do because of what it brings you after you go through them.
For sure. And, getting into the topic of addiction, addiction can disguise itself in a lot of different ways.
For sure.
And in a lot of different extremities. And that's one of the things that I have found most common with elite athletes and people that, have substance misuse. They're performing daily with extremes, right? So, you like to go to the gym, but now you're spending 6 hours at the gym every day. Or some people will live in the gym all day. They'll eat their lunch at the gym. They're there. That guy who's trying to make it to the UFC, like he's in the gym a lot. And one thing I love about baseball and MMA is they're both sports of failure and getting punched in the face and getting knocked down. And to experience that every day and get hit every day and fail and strike out and get out and miss that ball and, you know, have that over and over and over again, that takes a lot of resiliency, and you have to be relentless, right? To face that much failure. And that's when it becomes so important to understand how to process failure and understand what failure is to you. And like you talked about, okay, well, now you're leading the team in errors. Well, how are you processing? Are you able to recover? And it's the same thing with fighting. Like, okay, well, can you get punched in the face and not get knocked out? You know, or if you do get knocked down, like how quickly can you recover? When somebody has you, you know, in a submission, like, are you able to get out? And I think that's what translates into our life often is so quickly we can feel like we're in a rear naked choke and can't get out and can't remove the arm. And that can become the elite mindset of feeling that way. And like, you know, I see you in here, you put a lot of constraints. And I think that is like one of the coolest things. If you guys, you know, haven't watched Joey train, we do a lot of different constraints here and it's very, very cool. But again, that's something that you can take into life. Like life is going to put constraints on you. Life is going to take away an angle. Life is going to give you your weakness over and over and
Slam
over
the
again.
door.
Exactly.
Close
Slam
the
the
window.
door.
Yeah.
You know, you're going to lose. You're going to face.
Sometimes you went the wrong way and got to backtrack.
Exactly. Yeah, you're going to get injured at these high levels. And again, it's about how quickly can you recover? How are you processing? How are you communicating with your support group, with your nearby close friends and family, therapist, you know, whatever that may be. But it's so important to reach out and voice that. Like you said, we can't let, you know, the devil get in our head and speak those lies and putting us on that island of isolation, because that becomes a very dark place. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think a big thing too that like a lot of people, you know, miss along with it is like, you know, for example, like when the reason that we use so many constraints when we're actually in the room is it's really a brain thing, right? Is constraining the brain and constraining the CNS system to respond a certain way, right? And being like, hey, I'm taking away all these other options. Like you can't do this, you can't do this. Well, then it's starting to force you to self-organize within those constraints to find another solution. And while there is more than one way of doing things, right? There's only so many ways. And again, as the human brain and how we do things, like don't get me wrong, there's more than one way of how I can process these things and how I, you know, what route I go and what story I put behind it. But, you know, one of the things I talked about is one of my friends, their dad is a psychologist. And one of the things we would talk through was like, okay, like he would say, he would try to unpack this. And again, how his brain worked was getting past the story and getting into how the brain really overcame it. Like, and you could put whatever story you want around it, but there's science behind what the brain needs to do to kick on a certain area of the brain to get, for example, when people are like, you know, like, I'm so focused on the breath, right? Well, it's not really like, I mean, obviously there's a lot of things that happen like when you focus on that other system, but more than anything, again, from like what I'm looking in is like, it kicks on another part of your brain, right? And because the breath is happening now, right? And so because it's happening now, right? Where, you know, yeah, that old saying of, oh, okay, like, a depression happens, you know, because you're living in the past, and anxiety happens because you're living in the future.
Right.
And so it brings you into a now of being like, let me be here now and experiencing what's actually happening here now and not drifting one way or another. And that's a skill set. And also when they say it's a skill set, we take it a layer deeper. The reason it's a skill set is you're looking at, you know, like brain activation, right? And being like, okay, these are the patterns that this brain, you know, again, like, our brains are always responding to like stimulus. And that's why, like, for example, like what we do from a training side is so rooted in psychology because again, for me to get them to adapt, I need their brain to work in a different pattern, right? And a movement pattern, right, is really a mapping of the brain. Right? It's a mapping of what the brain wants to do and what sequential order and how it goes to. And again, like that's why when they do like obviously those like psychology studies and they're mapping out the brain, they're figuring out like, okay, well, when they see this type of this part of their brain like super activates and lights up, right? Like for example, like you know, I'm sure if like me, for example, like, yo, if you put some like sugar or something in front of me, my brain's like, like want it, right? Yeah. And for other people, you know, again, that don't, you know, again, aren't addicted to sugar like that or X, Y, and Z, that part of the brain doesn't light up like that, you know, when they do that. And again, they've remapped it to do different things, and you're training yourself to do these other things. And so like it is a skill set because you can train your brain. And again, like just like I do out here with people, you can train it to do different things, and it is a skill, right, that you could actually change, which is kind of crazy to think about.
It's crazy.
You can.
Yeah, no, neurofeedback
Yeah.
is incredible. I had the opportunity to get a neurofeedback test done. Put the swimmer's cap on my head and tested all the things, and it was really, really amazing. And it's actually the point where I found out how I respond to positive affirmation. I had the opportunity to do it with a mentor of mine, and he used my brain as an example, but that was the first time that I had realized actually for how long and how deep it was that I was stuck in the I'm not enough, or I'm not doing enough, or I, had so many identity issues, right? And so positive affirmations were huge for me. But until I saw the science, until I did that neurofeedback, I was like, oh, like didn't even think twice about it. Like words, okay, great. But people, again,
There's
that's
science
another
behind
thing.
this.
Yeah, there's science behind this. My brain reacts to positive affirmation. And now, since then, that's become one of my greatest tools is positive affirmation. And I will journal positive affirmations. For a minute, I had them all over my wall, over my mirrors, everywhere in my car, all over the place. Because again, such a small tool that, is sending our brain signals if we would just utilize it. I definitely think that positive affirmations are one of the, most underrated tools, but
for sure.
Yeah,
And
crazy.
again, like also in other ways, like also knowing obviously seasonal and what are those things, like for example, we could also be addicted to positive affirmation.
100%.
Right.
100%.
And so like now it's like I need not like again like with like I need you to tell me I'm doing a good job.
For sure.
I need you to pat me on the butt. And also too, at certain seasons of my life, I think what people get confused in unwrapping all these, at certain seasons of my life, I might need more of it right now.
For sure.
I might need more attention in this area right now because again, my dad just died, or I just, I've been dedicating my life to this goal for years and years, and like it just blew up in my face.
Yep.
Right. And it's hard getting my momentum back going again, and it really
Right.
hurt me, right? And it really hurt my ego, or it really hurt these other things that I maybe had identity in there. Maybe again, I
Right.
set myself up for some of these things, and I might need some of that as well, and I think that's the thing is we try to put it like in a box. We try to get put it in a box where it's like, it would be bad if we did that forever. But it's like
Right.
medicine, for example. Like, again, like if I'm taking ibuprofens every single day because I'm in pain X, Y, and Z, and it makes the pain go away. Okay, but like it doesn't mean that me taking ibuprofens is a bad thing. Sometimes I just have a headache, right? And it's like,
Right.
okay, boom, and it goes away. We're good to go. But if I'm constantly not drinking water, which is what's causing it, well, then again, I should fix the root issue along with it. But it in itself isn't necessarily a bad thing.
For
And
sure.
that's where, like, again, I think along with that, because there is a lot of jobs and again, a lot of things out there in the world that are really like, it doesn't even jobs, whatever you want to call it, like, that are like thankless.
Oh, for sure.
Right. And again, along with that is that, for example, like, there's a lot of things that I've had to do through my life where it's like, if I was waiting, and again, I think that that's what kind of prepared me was like early in my life, I didn't get a lot of positive affirmation back of, it was usually critiques.
Right.
Now there's blind spots for me that I've now had to deal with of understanding like that's how my brain started working because that's all I heard all the time. But because of that as well, a lot of times don't go searching. Like I'm not waiting for someone to come and pat me on the butt.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So that does give me an advantage over, again, for some, if it was flip flop the opposite way, where you couldn't do anything without somebody sitting there and patting you on the butt every step of the way, all the way up. It's again, like a lot of things that I do, I actually get the opposite, not positive affirmation, but negative affirmation on the same sense of people affirming that they don't agree with how I'm thinking, or they don't agree with how I'm training, or they don't agree with how I'm running the business, or how I'm spending money, or where I spend my time, or whatever that might be. Right.
Right.
And so, the bigger that need is for those other things, again, like there's everything in between of how that maps out, and like, kind of unpacking those things of, in reality, getting to a place of like not needing external
For sure.
things
For sure. And it's funny you mentioned that because there's one thing I've seen a trend in, and I've seen it with a lot of fighters, and I've started to see it a lot more in younger athletes, where they constantly want the spotlight. The look at me, look at me, look at me.
Yeah,
like,
yeah, yeah.
hey, look at
Yeah,
me,
yeah,
look
yeah.
at me.
For sure.
And by no means am I saying like they're just chasing attention.
For sure.
But in a sense,
Yeah, sometimes.
yeah, sometimes.
Or you know what I think about? It's an immature brain. Think about it with too. I always think about, for example, when I'm around my nephews, and let's say they're like 5, 6 years old. Dad, watch
this.
Watch this.
Hey,
watch me
this.
jump over this rock.
Yes.
Right? Is like, you want that, especially at an adolescent stage where like you really do need that affirmation and those things younger. And sometimes when those needs weren't met when you were younger or whatever those things
It
are,
carries
you're
in.
looking for that.
Yes.
Or it develops later in your life that you
sure.
saw someone get a bunch of attention and you were envious of those other things and everything in between, right?
Yeah, everything in between. And it's funny because a lot of times, I'll hear our elite players, they're really good in the classroom. They get great grades, and I think it goes to the extremes. Like scholar, student athlete, student comes first. Amazing. Now on the flip side of that, the athlete that maybe isn't that great is usually your class clown, gets in trouble, gets sent to the principal office.
Listen, nobody call me out like that.
Yeah. Direct hit. But I think it's so interesting. And I think, and maybe again, if you had advice for that player, being that, you were so close to that reality, so many young players now I feel like are struggling with the look at me, the watch what I can do.
Yep.
And it's carrying to the classroom. It's carrying it home. What do you tell that player?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of older. There's a previous generation where they were so anti, like it was like this humility of it's expressed this humility, like, oh, act like you've been there before, all these other things, right? And again, that doesn't mean that these people weren't struggling with the same things. They just weren't expressing it or allowed to express how they were feeling in those certain ways. And now we've opened the door to allow players where they hit a home run, they bat flip and do whatever and those achievements. And I think there is there's some careful places that we need to go where I don't think suppressing it is necessarily the answer there.
Right.
But also too, figuring out why bat flipping or yelling when you strike the guy out in the inning, or that in itself necessarily isn't bad. But why I'm doing it could be an underlying issue of like, of like the need for attention, the need for those other things to, for the other team to recognize my status or X, Y, and Z, or what that looks like. And I think that like a lot of people really admire somebody that is very not in need, right? Or not thirsty for that attention or these other things, of being like, hey, this is what I do. But you can't just fake it. And you don't fix the real issue. Again, you're putting a Band-Aid on it by acting like you've been there before, which again, someone said that the other day, like, oh, I'm mad at these Little League World Series kids because they hit this home run and, act like you've been there before. And he's like, someone like Peabody that, was here on the podcast. He was like, bro, like he's 12 at the Little League World Series. He hasn't been there before. And like, yeah, like again, like there is those things of being like, yo, like he's just being 12.
Yes.
Like, it's okay for him to be 12
100%.
and again, be excited and express his emotions. And, again, X, Y, and Z. And yes, you are teaching this thing of like, but like, stop trying to make the 12-year-old be an adult, right? Like, again, there is
100%.
these stages and things that they're going through as well. But my advice on the same way is like, first off, I might be bad in this way, is that also too, everything that got me in trouble when I was at school is a lot of my skill sets now. Like I'm really good at being in front of people. I'm really good at talking in front of hundreds or thousands of people. Like I can do that and be okay on stage and present things and not be sitting there, second guessing myself the whole time and all those things. I've built those skills up. Also too, I'm not afraid of confrontation. I'm not afraid to have hard conversations. I'm not afraid of X, Y, and Z. There's other things that, again, like obviously I struggle with all those things, but I think within all of it is there's this messy middle of figuring out like who you are, and I've had plenty of athletes, for example, like, a lot of times at these bigger schools, the reason that these guys are also really good in school is because, well, to get into that school, you got to be a good student. Like you could be talented as you want. Like, I know plenty of talented players that don't have the school, like don't have the grades, don't have test scores, don't have the X, Y, and Z to get into some of these schools. Like not everybody can go to Stanford.
Right.
Not everybody can, get into a lot of these places. The acceptance rates are all different compared to what they're trying to do and what the majors are. And also, too, it's really hard to be really good at baseball and do that other major as well.
For
There's a
sure.
reason why athletes pick certain majors typically, and there's the joke about, majors that athletes take. There's all those things together. And I don't think particularly that you need to be one way or another. I think Gary Vee, for example, is, he was talking about that the other day of like, hey, like, it wasn't that I was not smart because I didn't get good grades in school or X, Y, and Z. Just like it wasn't what I was interested in. And also too, like, a lot of things happen out of, he explained it like, fear, right? Of people acting certain ways because of fear of like, again, I can't get on stage because, I'm afraid of what people might think of me X, Y, and Z. Well, other people just like have no desire to be on stage. Like,
Right.
like that's just, I like, again, like that's not my thing. It doesn't get me going. It doesn't fulfill me, blah, 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 blah. And like the root reasoning behind that is so much more important. So I think the bigger thing for me and what advice that I would give in that same way is like, hey, look, like you're not crazy. You're not this, you're not that. Like you're human, right? You're things are happening in your life and you're responding in the best ways that you know how. At the time doesn't mean it's right? Like there's I forgot, I was reading or someone said this the other day of being like, there's you're right, but here's the truth. Like, yeah, like you're right. Like you got a piece of this, right? But there's also a deeper level of truth that's along with this. And I think along with it is like, hey, like, every day I feel like I'm becoming more of me. I'm releasing more things. And again, it's not linear. Like there's, ups and downs. Mental health isn't just like better and better and better and better, just like anything else in your life, right? There's times where I'm, these other things are happening, or I'm letting, I don't feel like I'm in a good place, or I don't feel as fulfilled, or all these other things, right? Because a lot of people think, because of what I've achieved, right, in the space of baseball, that there's no way that I ever have any of these things, or I ever question myself, or I ever do that.
You're
like,
invisible.
Yeah, like that's not how it happens, right? And the reality there is that like every day is like and then I go back to my basics and my foundation, right? Like, well, what have I been letting in? Have I been letting in all that hate? Have I been letting in everybody's criticisms? Have I been letting, okay, well, am I also letting the love in? Am I also letting these things? And also, too, am I getting better at filtering a lot of that stuff? Is saying, like, yo, this guy is yelling at me on social media just because, like, I disagreed with his grandpa. And, like, it doesn't mean I'm an idiot. I just, again, along with it, like, his grandpa taught it different, and he loves his grandpa. And that doesn't mean that they can both coexist. You can love your grandpa and all those other things, and I can also be right, right? And also, too, I could also be wrong. Who cares, right? And along with that we're all on a journey and we're sharing those things and going along with it. So I think like what I would give to them is like advice-wise is like, yo, like, it's going to kind of sound standard, but like also too, just getting into, I read a lot. I was around a lot of people that thought a lot of different ways, very diverse, being, a lot of different social classes, a lot of different, really smart people and those things. Also too, be careful just because you admire someone, if it's Michael, even if it's Michael Jordan or Kobe or Mike Trout or Mookie Betts or, Juan Soto or all these other things. Like we have this mindset that, oh, they're where I want to be. So they must do everything they do must be all, all these other things. And like, that's just not the case. And there's, we're humans and we're dynamic and we can get around a lot of things. Just because they're in the major leagues doesn't mean that their swing is the most efficient thing that you could ever swing. Just because they're one of the better hitters in the league doesn't mean that they do everything very well. They do some things well, of course, right? But they're humans like anybody else, and they've managed those trends, and they've do enough things right to produce at that upper level. But there's always, like your quote kind of the other day, like I can always make, good better. And I, there's never a finish line there. And so if I can, the biggest thing that I would tie back to that is having that expression of, hey, like at the end of the day, remain curious and get away from judgment. And when you can start being curious about yourself and your ideas or how someone says something or what they're teaching or all these other things, is that if you can remain curious or with the beginner's mind, if you haven't read that book, right? If I can come into things just curious and open, right? Open mindset compared to a closed mindset, right?
Yep.
Is just do that with yourself. and being curious about why that made you angry, why that made you upset, why that made you cry, why that made you X, Y, and Z, and not judging yourself for how you're responding, right? But just being curious about yourself and wanting to learn more about you rather than, well, how would I not know about me? I've been in my body my whole life and da 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 blah blah. There's a lot about you you don't know.
Yeah, explore.
Yeah. And that would be mine, along with it as well. And so that's why too, again, like Tay, I know that you've had, so many different things and, just like anybody else of things going through as well is, I know that there's a lot of resources and things like too, the things that we're coming out with as well, that are really going in that direction. And, why don't you kind of start tapping on some of that stuff?
Yeah, no. I think, one area where you went, which is something, a couple main things that I plan to focus on, within the upcoming resources that we're going to, start pushing. But, it's the idea that things have to happen for us right now, and it's my clock and it's my time. Well, we'll have to get rid of the clock. We have to leave the clock, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like things will happen when they're meant to happen, and trust the timing.
Yeah.
Again, like going back to our relationship with God, like it's God's timing for me, when things happen, they will happen. But again, and then, another big topic that we talked about was identity. What happens when you're no longer an athlete?
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, we all aren't blessed to, be an athlete our entire lives. At some point that journey ends. And so a lot of things that, we're going to kind of get into and dive deep and explore are human, right? We're not always going to need to explore the athlete. We need to start exploring the human and all the other roles that we take on dad, take on mom, take on partner, take on all these different things that we need to explore. And again, when you're leaving the game, there's going to be a time of grief.
Mm-hmm.
And how we handle that. And then also for our younger athletes, our younger athletes that are facing the I'm not good enough, the am I going to go out and perform, the low confidence, the self-worth, the do I fit in, am I cool enough, all of that.
I think the biggest one nowadays too is people idolizing Division I.
For sure. For sure. And if I don't get there,
or
no.
pro baseball, yeah.
Right. And again, it's being okay and being able to process that, right? Because again, like we were talking about yesterday, like it's 1% that is going to get to that level. And that doesn't make you bad if you don't get there. That doesn't mean that you were not a good athlete. That doesn't mean that you didn't work your tail off. That doesn't mean that you didn't hustle and have good character and X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
It just means that there is a 1% of people that make it there. And that's okay.
And also too, some of those things like, I don't like to put caps on people in X, Y, and Z, but like, literally from birth, genetically, you weren't predisposed to ever be at these elite levels. Like, for example, bro, if you're Taylor's height, okay, and you're trying to make the NBA.
Listen, I'm 5'2" on a good day.
Or I'll take another one too. Papo used to always tell me this. This is, again, if you don't know Papo here locally, it's also my mentor, from coaching, but also too, Taylor's grandfather. But like, one of the things that he used to always tell me too, heavy set Puerto Rican, and he used to tell me, he'd be like, Joey, I grew up wanting to be a jockey. I just genetically wasn't set up. Like I was probably never gonna be a jockey, right? And he could have worked his tail off and all those other things.
Sure.
And again, it doesn't mean on that same sense that if I don't make it to this level, then I've failed, right? Like, you might have maxed out your capacity. And I think that, don't get me wrong, like, I think I always think that there's a little bit more in the tank and maybe some better information, what I could have done or this or that. But at the same time, for like how athletic I was and some of these other things and like the time and things I put in with what I did have and all this stuff, like I think I came closer than a lot of people of maxing out my capacity of what I could have done. But also too, like, I don't regret any of those things. And the other thing, before I throw it back to your resources, is the other things I would say, like advice wise, is I was literally said that this morning when I was praying, was that that I just trust God and be where my feet are, right? Like some of those skills, like we want skills, like for example, like I might want, bigger biceps. I might want, to bat 500. I might want to do the X, Y, and Z. Okay, well, like if I want those things, X, Y, and Z, to do that and want those results, like I need to be where I am, right? And learn the lessons that I'm currently right in front of me that I should be learning. that I'm not. Right. And because of that, I'm so living in the future or living in the past or what I didn't do or what I should be doing or whatever those things are. I'm not learning right now. And so I gave the example yesterday. It was like, hey, like, dude, like my dog Bane, you know, I'm like, the Bane could stand up and sit there and run and chase his tail for hours and hours and hours. And he worked really hard, but his goal was to get to California and he didn't go anywhere but stay in the bedroom because he's sitting there running in circles. And again, and some of those circles are, you know, living in my past or living in my future. When in reality, if I just was where I was and understood what it was going to take to get to these other places and sat in my season and trusted what God had for me in this season right now, right? So that he could develop these skills in there, develop my character, develop my mindset, develop these things. And again, instead of looking at my past, and this is a place that I grew to, is instead of looking at my past as detrimental, and I can't believe I grew up. Those were my advantages. God put those things in my life. He developed those things. For example, if God didn't develop in me, there isn't a perfect person. There isn't, oh, I should have all these other skills. We all have different skills. We all have, there is a general level of mental health and all these other things, but we are unique in that same way that my adaptation of growing up and not getting that affirmation is why I can do what I do now, is because I don't need it, right? Where someone else might have grown up with a ton of affirmation, right? And then now when they stop getting it, they might be really skilled at a lot of other things, but they weren't built out to be a Navy SEAL, or they weren't built out to be this elite athlete that can operate at that level. And we all have different purposes and serve different things.
For sure.
And the last thing that I said to someone the other day too is like, look, someone can be a mentor in one area of your life and not another, right? For example, you could look at Kobe Bryant, you could look at Michael Jordan, you could look at Mike Trout and all these other things, and you could look to them and go, wow, like I really admire how they perform, how they show up every day, how they do X, Y, and Z. But again, maybe spiritually, maybe how they are with their family, maybe how are all these other things. Like maybe those things are not areas that I look to them for because, you know, that's an area that, again, it might be someone that's not. It might just be my dad that I look up to for that, or my friend, or whatever that is. And I think that that's an area is like too often the brain wants to make things white and black and bipolar, or, you know, it's a, there's another word, binary, is that we want to, like, our brain wants to make things binary, where it's like this way or that way, when in reality, you know, it's like you go throughout life and you take bits and pieces of everything and all these experiences, and then it creates uniquely your experience and your experience as a human here on earth. And we all have a unique role to play,
For sure.
you know, that's unique to you. So instead of, because that's a slippery slope, sorry to go down that route, but it's a slippery slope as well to always be thinking of everything I'm not, right? And, oh, well, you know, I don't need affirmation from all these other people. So again, at times, guilty, it can get me, I can lean towards arrogance, right? Because like, well, why did you think I needed your opinion or you to approve of what I'm saying, right? And I've, you know, again, like I've had to learn to balance those things of being like, it's great because it makes me do what I need to do. But I, you know, I've kind of talked about it like, you know, exactly, like, let's say maybe this is also a slippery slope because of, you know, politics right now, but I'll go there in the sense of, yo, like, it takes a little bit of arrogance to be the president of the United States, like leader of the free world. And I know so much and so many different areas that I'm the one that should be leading, right? You need a little bit of, you know, like that you need to walk and be able to think like, hey, I'm not really I can silence all that noise. I can silence all that noise because I'm walking in that space. And you could also tie into there, it either takes a little mixture of a potion, arrogance with a whole bunch of humility, right? To go the opposite way as well. And sometimes we can mistake deeper levels of humility for arrogance, in the sense of like, oh God, you're just so arrogant walking in. It's like, no, I know I'm gonna make mistakes.
Right.
That's the difference. Like you see that as arrogance, where in reality it's a deeper level of humility, where like, I know I don't know all these things and I can't control all things and I can't do all these X, Y, and Z. Right. And I can put those things out. Or for example, when I post on social media or something like that, I know everything I say and everything that we put out and all those things. Like, I'm not right. I've been wrong every step of the way. Right. So what am I going to do? Not share until I'm 100% right? Well, then I'm never going to share.
For sure.
Because we'll never be 100% right and all those other things. So,
For sure.
But along with that, I want to throw throw the ball back over to you. Pass.
Yep.
Is
Now you got my brain moving.
yeah. Now the same thing too is get the people excited about some of the things that we will be doing here in the future, some of the directions that we are going, and some of the things that you'll be heading.
Right.
Again some of these things are soon. Some of these things are now.
Right.
And then some of these things could, over the next couple of years and like what that's going to turn into and all of that as well. So,
yeah. Well, just to scoot back a little bit again, like where you said, being okay with like, I'm not going to be right all the time and I have to be open to failure and losing and all those things. Like, look, growing up, I've been an expert at failure. I've been an expert at not winning.
yeah, I'm good at that.
Like my freshman year played at Gorman. They only had a varsity softball team. And that was my first year playing. Okay, so you can imagine how that went. Facing pitchers, I thought that ball was going to kill me. All right, but I got out there and I still, put the work in and played the game. Also, listen, y'all, I'm 5'2" on a good day. All right, with the right shoes on.
Yeah.
And I was over at Gorman also trying to play basketball. Okay, now played JV, nothing crazy, but still, that was like to play JV basketball at Gorman was huge back then. Like they had a really good team that had won state, I think, like 3 or 5 years in a row. Crazy, but there I was 5'2", trying to play basketball. Mind you guys, that was my last year playing basketball. I realized at that level everybody was a little bit taller than me.
Yeah.
But I took on softball and I played, a bunch of different levels and or a bunch of different schools because I moved around a bit, trying to just was chasing all these things. But again, I failed a lot. Made it into 2 different police academies. I'm obviously not a police officer right now.
Yeah.
Another failure that I had perceived. I grew up doing MMA, getting punched in the face, losing a lot. I remember, I'll never forget it. My first competition, I went against this lady. She was a little bit older than me, and it was just because of the weight bracket. And I had her in the deepest choke you could think of. Like I was on my tippy toes, or I had her in the air, and she didn't tap. And I was like, "What is going on? Like this lady is bionic." And again, like for me, mentally, worked my tail off, made weight, did all the things, still lost. So again, I'd like to think like the reason I'm so good at mental performance now and meeting so many different realities is because I have failed in a lot of different arenas. I failed in front of a lot of people. I have failed, for whatever that means. I define it in a bunch of different ways now that I'm older and a lot more mature, and, have grown my emotional intelligence, significantly from when I was younger. But the reason that mental performance strikes my interest so much is because I had to tap into my own so many times in so many different places, in sport, in life, in career. And I had to utilize a lot of different things. And a lot of those different things is kind of what I plan to bring to the farm, which is, a journal, an interactive journal that prompts you to think certain prompts, certain questions that help me get out of a lot of ruts, that help me get out of a lot of dark spaces.
Reflect and
be able to reflect, be able to process. Because again, I didn't always feel like expressing my emotions. Better than anybody, my family isn't the greatest at expressing our emotions. So I would journal a lot. I've always been a writer. I love writing. It's always been my escape, as well as, working out when I was younger. That was also another escape for me. But now I'm at a place where my body has limitations. My shoulder is not the same. My back is definitely not the same. Years of wrestling, my back is toast. So I can't do all the things I used to do. So again, with that, what are my other resources? So, again, all those things that I plan to bring are things that have helped me. Things that I have actually done myself. There is nothing that I will have somebody else do that I haven't done and that I don't believe works. I think that there is, people get lost in translation where, well, have you done it? Well, okay, yes, I have. I have tried this in my darkest of times in a bunch of different arenas. And, the other thing that has helped me a lot become a high performer after so much failure is having a planner and putting down, logging my activities, logging what my day looks like, logging, whatever it is that I'm trying to focus on. A lot of us, when we're heavy thinkers, right? You and I were, thinking a lot. We have a lot of thoughts throughout the day. How do we organize that? And so again, that's another, something that's going to be in, what we'll kind of call a high performance planner of some kind. But in that high performance planner, I plan to be able to help others theme your months. What's your focus that month? What's your focus today? How are you going to utilize your time? How do you plan to get better today? Never mind yesterday, never mind tomorrow, but what can we
Intentionally
do
growing.
today?
Yeah.
How can we be more intentional? I like to remind myself every day, today, how am I going to show up? What are my intentions today? I literally have in my planner, if you were to look at my planner right now, you would see 9 a.m. every day, set my intentions. Every day. It doesn't fail. That's what I do. That's my time block to set my intentions for the day, what I plan to achieve. And like I said, I've had the opportunities to, similar to you, get promoted really fast, get to, a higher level in different work environments, and do some different things. So, that is my evidence per se, that those things, they do work. They'll work for you if you put that work in. But, in that same sense, with that same sentence, like, something that they say in recovery and AA is like, it only works if you work it, and if you're, you could get the journal, but if you don't use it, then it's not going to work. You can, go to your game and, go play, but if you didn't do the prep work and the drills,
I
then,
can write you a program.
yeah, I can write you a program, but
Yeah.
if you don't do it, then that's on you.
For sure.
Like Cody can give you homework, but if you don't do it, then that's on you.
100%.
Results don't come from just hanging out and like waiting for them.
For sure.
Right. And I think one of my mistakes growing up was thinking I'm naturally athletic, I'll be good. I'm naturally athletic, I'll make the team. And that wasn't always the case.
Yeah. I was the opposite. I was like, I was always like, everybody's better than me. I got to work.
My coach, my senior year, I didn't play sports because I did too much nonsense. But the coach was so upset, and I could see it in his eyes because, again, I was a natural athlete. But I was like so far out of emotional intelligence. I was not mature. I was, being a typical teenager, doing all the things, wilding out. And, that, I had to sacrifice my senior year of playing for that. But again, I do believe in God's timing and God's journey. And, with, like I said, getting to experience so much what I perceived at those times as failure, I do believe that gave me an edge, later on in my life, now in my adult careers. Failing so much is really what has allowed me to win now.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, no, definitely. And then also too, we're going to do, we have some resources as well. Like I said, some of those things are now,
Right.
Some of these things are future projects and some other things. And there's a bunch of things that we also have the marks of, like what we're going to do with athletes in-house, and also
For
too,
sure.
what we'll be able to do with them remotely and all these other things. And also some really cool things that might, some seeds that are planted that might come down the road with, great podcast and great guests and all these things that we want to do is bring from that side, and what we'll bring into Farm Plus of all these other resources when it comes into, again, like, daily videos or exercises to go through, or, reflection plans, or like for example, like, for big parts of my life, again, at one point I used to really, write them out and all those things as well. Now I do a lot of it mentally, and I do write some of these things down as well when I do my reflections of what that looks like. But having an intentional growth plan, right? Like, how am I actually going to develop what skills or what things would I like the things, and how am I going to get there, and what that looks like, what resources am I going to tap on,
For sure.
people, it could be journaling, it could be reading, it could be watching sermons, it could be watching, Mental Works of Mind speak, it could be going to conferences, it could be, whatever that is, right? It could be, resources like Farm Plus, it could be
For
whatever
sure.
those things are, right? And so we're gonna provide some of those as well. But why don't you kind of tap into what we'll be releasing with this podcast that they can go and grab as well.
For sure. No, we're going to put together a resource, and, by no means am I going to take full credit on it. I'm definitely working with the guys here on the team to make this something that can reach levels of athletes, not just youth, not just, college, but, levels of athleticism and levels of athletics, something that can be, something you grab before the game, just a little quick kickstart motivator, something that, again, a resource that will give you something else to go to complement that.
We're going to get your beak wet.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
we gonna
Yeah.
start doing some things, but even another thing, not to get y'all too excited, but you kind of kind of shuffled the idea into my brain to make, one of my most popular speeches a course, which, I'm super excited about that. It's my crash course to your goals, which is, one of my speeches that I've done with a bunch of different organizations. Like I, mentioned earlier, I've had the opportunity to speak at different schools, different teams, different businesses, that are very profitable. But that crash course, basically, and I'll give you the acronym just to, let you know what's coming. But it's confidence, research, accountability, sacrifice, and hustle. And those were things that, I'll really dive into in the course, talking about each one, why those are important, where they come into play, at what times are, some of those things the most prevalent, and things like that. So that's, just one thing that, we'll probably release here in the near future.
Yeah.
But something that I'm,
When we got solidified
yeah.
dates, we'll let y'all know.
Yeah. Let me put some love in there. I gotta make it
And
with
then
some
the
love.
other thing too that we're launching here too is going to be that other social media, which will be big,
Mm-hmm.
just as daily, things, and again, something for you guys to follow as well is, daily things and things that you're finding that are be super beneficial, and then also. Again, if it's exercises, random thoughts, intentions, all those other things is just reminders. And a lot of times on a daily basis, that's what's cool about the story functions on a lot of these things is you can kind of tap on some of these things of smaller things of thought, which, might be, for example, it might be 3 sentences, but those 3 sentences might be really big for your day,
Sure.
And that's why I said the same thing too, is I think the same thing about, prayer, all those things. Like, it doesn't matter if I have a 3-sentence prayer or a 30-minute prayer, again, like, God can use all those different things to shape my focus and my intention for those days and what that looks like. And also too, maybe I do 33 1-sentence prayers throughout the day, and it helped me just stay on pace of what that is. Like, God, please give me grace right now. Like, boom, okay. And then Jesus' name,
and
you know, like,
similar, what
sure.
we use to strengthen our relationship with God, for us in our faith journey,
For sure.
For the person, like, again, like one of my main goals is strengthening the relationship with self.
Yeah.
That's huge.
For sure.
It's huge.
It's big. Yeah. So definitely in that way. And there's so many things that we'll be going through. And again, this by far won't be the, last, podcast that we do again. And also too, I think it would be, we actually talked about, and you guys give us feedback on this. We're also thinking about the same way as being like, okay, like we have consistent podcasts where like I kind of filter you guys through, where again, not only do you guys have guests on and those things as well in different areas of our podcast, but also in ones where I sit down with you guys, where again, I'm talking to you, I'm talking to Cody, I'm talking to Nicole, right? I'm talking, maybe Drell with some business stuff, because I have a lot of people now that also reach out about wanting like business advice on what we do as a business and how we set things up and why and all those other things, which is a big passion of mine that I talk about a lot. You guys know in-house that like business, that's a massive passion of mine. And people are now reaching out and asking questions about why we do or how we did a lot of the things that we've done. And, there's a lot of things there of like, and again, when it comes into leadership and all those other things. And, I think that alternating through all of that, and also to like the resources and things that we'll be releasing will be really cool. So, definitely too, by the time we release this, we should have, again, a link for you guys to go and click inside the show notes. You should be able to go down and download the resource that Tay's putting together. And again, I think they'll be big there as well. And also too, most likely we should have that social media and all those things built out as well. So we'll drop those links so you guys can go and kind of take advantage of some of those things, and it'll keep you up to date on all these other projects and things that we're working on to push out over the next couple of years, and things that will go in this way. And you'll be like, hey, I remember that first podcast when I heard Taylor talk. And it'll be awesome there as well. And then also make sure to follow Taylor on social media, just personally as well. She's always putting out a bunch of stuff, Taylor Tip Tuesdays and all kinds of other things that, she's putting out all the time as well. So make sure to follow her as well, so you can follow her journey and, her perspective from the farm. She's also posting some funny things on stories and stuff behind the scenes.
We have some fun around here.
Yeah, absolutely. So, all right, guys. Well, from us and all of our friends and family are from the farm. Until next time, Farm System out.